Who would emerge victorious in a one-off battle between Alexander the Great and Hannibal? Now, there's a question to ponder. We're talking about two of history's most formidable military leaders, each with their unique strengths and weaknesses. Imagine a battlefield where Alexander's strategic brilliance meets Hannibal's tactical genius, a clash of leadership styles, strategies, and armies. Intrigued? Then buckle up, as we delve into the strengths and weaknesses of these two formidable leaders to find answers. First up, we have Alexander the Great, renowned for his strategic brilliance. A mastermind on the battlefield, Alexander's strategies were not only complex but also executed with a precision that often left his enemies in awe. His ability to plan and execute maneuvers, whether in the face of a head-on assault or a defensive stand, often tipped the scales of victory in his favor. Yet strategic brilliance was just one facet of Alexander's strengths. Another was his exceptional leadership and charisma. Alexander had a unique ability to inspire his troops, instilling in them a sense of loyalty and determination that was palpable. His soldiers were willing to follow him to the ends of the earth, a testament to the depth of their loyalty and the strength of his leadership. This charisma was not just limited to his own men. Alexander was known to win over conquered peoples, incorporating them into his army and administration. This ability to unite diverse peoples under his banner further extended his reach and power. The last of Alexander's key strengths was the versatility of his army. Trained to adapt to different situations and terrains, his forces were capable of launching a rapid assault one moment and shifting to a defensive stance the next. Whether in the mountains of Persia or the river valleys of India, Alexander's army was capable of holding its ground and turning the tide of battle. This versatility was also reflected in the makeup of his army. Comprising infantry, cavalry, and even siege engines, Alexander's forces were a combined arms force, capable of responding to a wide range of battlefield scenarios. His companion cavalry, in particular, were a force to be reckoned with, often serving as the decisive factor in his victories. These strengths, from his strategic brilliance to his charismatic leadership and versatile army, made Alexander a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. They were the pillars upon which he built an empire that spanned 3 continents and ushered in an era of Hellenistic culture that would shape the ancient world for centuries to come. However, despite his strengths, Alexander had weaknesses that could be exploited. As much as Alexander was a strategic genius, his overconfidence often led him astray. He was known to take risks, pushing himself and his troops to the brink and sometimes beyond. This overconfidence often came from his unwavering belief in his own abilities and the loyalty of his army. But as we all know, confidence can sometimes blind us to the realities and dangers that lie ahead. Alexander's audacious style of warfare, while often leading to spectacular victories, could also expose him to unexpected dangers. His aggressive tactics made him vulnerable to ambushes or surprise attacks. You see, in his quest for rapid and decisive victories, Alexander would often plunge headfirst into battle, exposing his flanks and leaving his rear unprotected. This could potentially provide a cunning adversary like Hannibal with opportunities to strike where Alexander least expected it. Furthermore, Alexander's aggressive approach often led to overextension on the battlefield. His desire to conquer and control vast territories could sometimes stretch his forces thin, making it harder to consolidate his gains or react swiftly to sudden enemy counterattacks. These weaknesses, though part of what made Alexander the Great, great, also made him vulnerable. They exposed chinks in his otherwise formidable armor, creating opportunities that a tactically astute opponent could exploit. These weaknesses could potentially give Hannibal an edge in battle. Now let's shift our focus to Hannibal, the Carthaginian general known for his tactical genius. Unquestionably, Hannibal's name is synonymous with tactical brilliance. He was a master of battlefield strategy, and his ability to outmaneuver and outthink his opponents is legendary. One of his most celebrated maneuvers was the double envelopment at the Battle of Cannae, where he successfully encircled a larger Roman army. This audacious move exemplifies Hannibal's innovative and creative strategic mind, always ready to defy the conventional wisdom of his time. But Hannibal's genius wasn't limited to his ability to craft grand strategies. He was also incredibly adaptable. He could adjust his tactics based on the strengths and weaknesses of his enemies, making him unpredictable and difficult to counter. Whether he was up against the fierce Roman legions or navigating the treacherous terrain of the Alps, Hannibal had an uncanny knack for turning challenges into opportunities. His ability to improvise and adapt was a key factor in his many victories. And then there was Hannibal's use of psychological warfare. He was a master at exploiting fear and uncertainty, using surprise attacks and other tactics to sow confusion and panic among his enemies. His crossing of the Alps, for example, was not only a brilliant piece of military strategy, but also a powerful psychological blow to the Romans who had believed the mountains to be an insurmountable barrier. He understood that battles are not just won with swords and spears, but also with the minds of soldiers and commanders. In many ways, Hannibal was a general ahead of his time. His use of combined arms, his understanding of logistics, and his grasp of the psychological aspects of warfare all speak to a military mind of the highest order. He was a general who could not only plan a battle but also inspire and lead his men to execute it. These strengths made Hannibal a formidable opponent for any adversary. His tactical brilliance, adaptability, and use of psychological warfare combined to make him one of history's greatest military commanders. Whether he was facing off against the might of Rome or leading his men through the Alps, Hannibal was always ready to do whatever it took to secure victory. Despite his tactical brilliance, Hannibal also had his share of weaknesses. Let's delve into them, shall we? Firstly, Hannibal often grappled with a lack of resources. His campaigns, while brilliant, were taxing and often stretched his supply lines thin. His army was far from home, making resupply and reinforcement a difficult task. This meant that the sustainability of his forces in prolonged battles was limited, a significant disadvantage in warfare. Secondly, Hannibal had a heavy reliance on his cavalry forces. Now don't get me wrong, his cavalry was highly skilled. They were the driving force behind many of his victories. However, they were not as dominant as Alexander's companion cavalry, one of the most formidable cavalry forces in history. This reliance could be a potential weak spot if faced with an opponent who could neutralize his cavalry advantage. Moreover, these weaknesses did not exist in isolation. They interacted with each other, exacerbating the challenges Hannibal had to face. For instance, the lack of resources could affect the effectiveness of his cavalry, further amplifying his problems. Such weaknesses could provide an opening for a strategic leader like Alexander. His versatile forces and strategic brilliance could potentially exploit these vulnerabilities, tilting the odds in his favor. However, it's important to remember that Hannibal was a master at adapting to his circumstances, turning weaknesses into strengths, and that could still make the battle fiercely competitive. These weaknesses could be exploited by a strategic leader like Alexander. Having assessed the strengths and weaknesses of both leaders, who would have the upper hand in a one-off battle? This question has sparked countless debates among historians and enthusiasts alike. Let's recap what we've learned today. Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king, was a master strategist. His ability to plan and execute complex maneuvers on the battlefield was second to none. He was also a charismatic leader who possessed the ability to inspire and lead his troops with a sense of loyalty and determination. Alexander's army was versatile, capable of adapting to different situations and terrains, making them a formidable force to reckon with. However, his overconfidence sometimes led him to make risky decisions or overextend on the battlefield. His aggressive tactics also made him susceptible to ambushes or surprise attacks, which could potentially put him at a disadvantage. On the other side of the battlefield, we have Hannibal, the Carthaginian general, renowned for his tactical brilliance. He had the ability to outmaneuver and outthink his opponents, making him a formidable adversary. His adaptability and use of psychological warfare, including surprise attacks and exploiting fear, were highly effective. Yet Hannibal often faced shortages in supplies and reinforcements, limiting his sustainability in prolonged battles. His reliance on cavalry, while skilled, was not as dominant as Alexander's companion cavalry, which could potentially put him at a disadvantage. Given these strengths and weaknesses, one might argue that the outcome could tilt slightly in favor of Alexander the Great. His strategic brilliance, versatile army, and strong leadership might give him the edge, especially in an open-field battle where his cavalry could be fully utilized. But let's not discount Hannibal's tactical genius and adaptability just yet. His ability to exploit weaknesses and adapt his strategies based on his enemies could make the battle fiercely competitive. He was unpredictable, and that's what made him a dangerous adversary. So, who would win in a one-off battle between Alexander the Great and Hannibal? It's a close call. Both were extraordinary leaders with their unique strengths and weaknesses. Ultimately, the specifics of the battle, such as terrain and troop morale, would heavily influence the result. It's not just about who was the better general, but also about the circumstances surrounding the battle. But isn't it fascinating to speculate, to imagine what might have happened if these two military geniuses had ever faced each other on the battlefield? History may not provide an answer, but the debate continues, and that's what makes it so intriguing.